Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, the First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright. And Andy, are you ready to wrestle?
Today we are talking about Minute 21, which begins with a smart aleck Gilmore and ends with a monologuing Colonel Phillips. Joining us on the show today and all week, one of our favorites, we have Father David Mowry back again for another season. Welcome, Father.
Father David!
Father David Mowry reporting for duty. Sirs.
You stand in line and you wait until somebody speaks to you.
Yes, sir. Wow, so thank you so much for having me back. I'm so thrilled to be here for Captain America.
Yeah, and conveniently, like, this is what I love. You know, I send out the list of all the minutes for people to pick, and you are so fast. You know, like, exactly the minutes that you want to pick. Like, in Thor, it was like the perfect week to talk about Thor. And this week, it's like, oh, of course, this is the perfect week to have Father David talking about Captain America.
Well, honestly, I was spoiled for choice because there was still a lot of availability, and I think you could take any 5 minutes in the first hour or so of Captain America and have such a great conversation about so many themes. I was torn between these 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes because, oh, they're both so good. But I love me a montage, so I couldn't say no to a whole week of a training montage.
And also, as we've learned, whenever Father Mowry watches any movie, he's already picking the 5 minutes for which he will guest on some future as yet undetermined Movie My Minute podcast.
All right, I'll own up that during Thor: Love and Thunder just released at the time of this recording, and I was thinking about, okay, so which of these 5 minutes in a movie about gods would I want to talk about?
We'll see it in 27 years.
Yeah, in about 50 years when we get to that.
Just a little bit of time, yes. But, that gives you plenty of time to think about it, right?
Well, I'll have nice succinct notes by that point. Or a War and Peace length tome.
Oh, my
One
goodness.
of the two.
Right. We might just have to narrow it down to a minute.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
That'd be fair.
Right. All right. Well, we are back in Camp Lehigh. This is the practice field, and we're joining in. Last we saw as we had a snarky line getting delivered to our lovely Agent Peggy Carter, and this is Gilmore Hodge. We hadn't really seen him last week. We come in on him. The shot actually starts right on him, but he and the soldier standing next to him are both kind of looking behind them and laughing and something. So you can't really tell who it is. It's not until this minute starts we really get to know this is Gilmore Hodge, as we find out. And of course, he's being snarky, and he's calling, Agent Carter Queen Victoria because of her accent. And it's a whole thing. Let's just start a little bit about the interaction between these two before we dig into the characters a bit more. What did you think about the way that this scene is set up?
It's always important to set up your bullies as complete heels as soon as possible, because we have a lot of story to tell here. So we really need to establish that Hodge is just the worst. And what I was amused by and just watching this scene was how willing Hodge is to completely disrespect authority figures, because Agent Carter comes in and she is clearly in charge. She has no trepidation. She is not a shrinking violet. She's not like, oh, these men, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. No, Peggy Carter is here. She is in charge. And there is immediate snark. There's immediate pushback from Hodge on her accent, on her sex, on everything about her. And I would expect this kind of snark amongst the guys in the barracks off of the training field. But then I remembered these are all draftees. These are all recruits. These are not seasoned military people. These are civilians who are being trained for the first time. So they're carrying over a lot of less than disciplined habits into the army.
And it's really like coming in with a British person too, which is like completely, I suppose, unexpected. You know, you kind of go to boot camp and you expect, I don't know, maybe it's just because of the era I grew up in, but I'm expecting kind of a Full Metal Jacket sort of thing with R. Lee Ermey yelling at me.
R. Lee Ermey. Nice. Just love it when you make those name pulls so quickly. I think those are the two things: the gender and the nationality are the things that in a movie that just oozes patriotism and testosterone, it's important to have this sequence set up, and that we get such delight on the part of Agent Carter that she gets to punch someone in the face quickly.
Oh, yeah.
The way she
Wasted
adjusts
no
her
time.
shoulders when when she is called out, by the voice off screen is just delightful.
She is fantastic, and she handles all this well. And there's actually an additional line in the script that was, is kind of cute. You can see why they didn't need it. She actually asks Hodge if he knows anything about jujitsu when she asks him to kind of step forward with one of his feet.
That was going to be my question. Why put the right foot forward?
Yeah, it was a strange little moment that was again, it was scripted, and I guess they just decided that they didn't need it because she says, "Are you familiar with the art of jujitsu, wherein your opponent's size and momentum are used against him?" And then of course she had put one leg forward as well, and so then and then she punches him, so the whole thing still happens. She punches him, and then she and when Hodge says no, she punches him, and she says neither am I, and she just kind of keeps going on. Odd little bit.
I don't know what I think about that addition. I like the way it is. First of all, I don't need any additional setup of her prowess. She's obviously in charge. She's wearing a better uniform, and the fact that she's able to execute such a solid punch, I don't think we need it. And I also think it diminishes her abilities by saying I'm not either. I think that's a lousy addition.
Oh yeah, that I would be on board if it was just straight demonstration of superior martial arts knowledge. Right. That Peggy Carter knows what she is about, not just in terms of being an SSR agent, but also in terms of combat. But yeah, to have that throwaway joke at the end, I think that was a good cut.
Good cut.
The other thing that is an interesting element that's going on here, you see when she first approaches in last week's, in the minute right before this one, that she's with like kind of an assistant who has a box of clipboards with papers on them, and they're actually passing these out, and that it's actually scripted. And this is something, it's kind of dark, I didn't realize, but I was like, I wonder if this is something that they did in the military. She says, "To begin with, I shall need you to complete this document," and Steve looks at it, and it's his last will and testament. And so all of these soldiers have to actually fill out their last will and testament. Very interesting. I mean, they obviously are still doing it. We just are left without that little detail. Do you feel like we needed that? Does it give you a sense of just kind of mortality in the scope of the military and everything?
That raises some of the like world building questions I have about this whole setup. So we have Colonel Phillips' line at the end about how we have good men and they're going to get a lot better. And he has this whole spiel that continues on through the rest of the week. Why draftees? Why are they using the absolutely fresh guys they've just pulled in? Because they're mixed in with Steve, and they're doing all the base, like the ropes course and everything else we'll see in the montage later on this week. So it gives me a sense that these are all guys who are equally untrained in terms of the military discipline. So the last will and testament thing kind of tries to, that would be something you would do to scare volunteers. That's something you do to make it clear, like, all right, you've volunteered for this, but you don't really understand the stakes. We're going to make it clear what the stakes are. To do it with draftees kind of communicates a callousness on the part of the government, that you are all research subjects and we don't really care what happens to you, but we're going to cover our butts and make sure that we go through all the motions with this.
Well, and I don't know if they are draftees though, because I know like they were going to, like the soldiers were going to enlistment centers. Now they are potentially draftees into this super secret super soldier program that is going on. Like, and that's something that I think is curious, because, and I'm curious kind of your opinions on this from both of you. We know Erskine and it seems Carter and Colonel Phillips are all kind of aware of this program that they're doing. I mean, it's not like, when Colonel Phillips, and we'll talk about him here in a bit, but when he comes up, he says, "I can see you're breaking in the candidates," which is, I mean, normally they'd say the recruits or the new privates or something like that. But this is clearly a group of soldiers that they're looking at to potentially draft into this super soldier program.
Okay.
And so,
well, and then the next words we hear him say are strategic scientific reserve.
yeah,
Right? I mean, like, that's right as the montage begins. So we do get the sense, I think, immediately that this is a special thing.
But and I think to Father Mowry's point, it's like they are freshly signed up, privates. Like, these are people just going into boot camp. Does it seem strange that, like, they aren't people who have been already serving for? Because, I mean, I don't know. I've seen other movies, and this is how I know how the military works because of all the movies I've seen. When they're recruiting people for these
danger to yourself and others.
I totally am. It's the worst. But when they're recruiting for these sorts of things, it's people who have already proven themselves in the field of battle. And so it's so interesting that we have this doctor who is basically looking for somebody who is fresh and hasn't been broken in at all. I mean, does it seem weird?
No, that actually is on brand for me. I mean, I think that makes sense, that they're looking for the weakest links to see if the super soldier program really can do. In the universe of Captain America, it makes sense to me that they would look for the weakest ones. Like, and weak doesn't mean physically weak in all sense. Like, obviously we have Hodge right next to, Steve, which is, and they're weak in two completely different ways.
Okay, that's something I want to touch on. I think on Friday, that's a good conversation point to come back to, because we hear more about what Dr. Erskine is looking for from the program. And I think that's a good place to talk about what it is they're trying to do here and what all is happening. I think for now, maybe it's the fact that the whole war effort is still kind of ginning up, that they're in 1942, they're still in the relatively early phases of the U.S.'s participation, and this is a new program because we, just to bridge this minute to tomorrow's minute, we learned this is an allied initiative, the Scientific Strategic Reserve. So everything is kind of new and slapdash, and whenever there is an international collaboration, everyone involved is like, well, we're not going to give our best people to this because we want our best people for our thing. So we're going to find other people to put into this shared project.
Which is a great point. So not only are they looking for the weak ones, but they're also only getting the weak ones.
Erskine, why do I keep getting all these people?
Why do I keep getting this garbage? It's so much garbage.
All right. Well, okay, let's backtrack a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about where we are and these people that we're meeting. So first off, we didn't talk about this last week because we were on all sorts of crazy tangents last week. Camp Lehigh, this is the location we are. We did mention that it was filmed in Slough, I believe, right, Pete? Is that what we did? Slough.
I think we're stuck on Slough, yeah.
Yeah, Black Park Country Park, which is right near Pinewood Studios. This is kind of this big area. And this
it's really
is
convenient that they would actually have such a military operation right by a movie studio.
Isn't it great?
That's so
especially
convenient.
When it looks like it's the 40s. It's perfect.
Yeah,
exactly.
Great,
it's pristine.
Camp Lehigh is where Steve goes to train in the comics, but it's very funny in the comics because you kind of meet Steve. We've talked about this before, but when he first walks into the room to get dosed with the super soldier serum. And then it's like this secret identity thing. And so he goes to boot camp after becoming Captain America, but Captain America is a secret identity. And he's kind of this bumbling soldier, Steve Rogers, in the military, who then, like, at night, he puts on his Captain America outfit and goes and fights. It's kind of silly. Camp Lehigh in the comics is just outside of Arlington, Virginia. I can't remember if they actually say New Jersey in this film. I feel like they actually say it's outside of New York or somewhere in New York, but New Jersey, I know it comes up in Winter Soldier.
I think I think by now it's established to be in New Jersey because of the Miss Marvel series.
Yeah, all the TV and stuff. Yeah, exactly. I think retconned it has officially been New Jersey, but I feel like it may be outside of it.
In Winter Soldier, Black Widow and Captain America have to drive for a while from Arlington National Cemetery, I mean the Triskelion, in order to get to Camp Lehigh.
Yes. Right. Just as another note, in the comics, this camp when he joins, this is actually where he meets Bucky Barnes, the quote mascot of the regiment. It's very funny in the comics.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this.
Oh,
So
I know. It's
wrong.
funny. In the comics, this was the 1965 retelling of Captain America. They reveal that Bucky's GI father had died in training, and then the fort adopted the orphaned boy as the camp mascot, which I just think is so strange. It's such a
1960s
strange,
comic books.
I know.
Oh, so silly.
And this is also what's great. Bucky, when he meets Steve, and then he comes to visit him at his tent at night to say hi, and he catches Steve putting on his Captain America outfit. And what Steve says to him, this is just like, again, the comics of the era. "You little rascal, I had to tan your hide. I guess you got me dead to rights. I am Captain America. From now on, we must both share the secret together. That means you're my partner, Bucky."
It's a lot to put on a kid, but
Right.
it tracks for comic books of the era.
Exactly. Well, every kid wanted that. So
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
like, yeah.
I want to be sworn to secrecy. Oh, I want to help Captain America. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, now, what you said about Steve Rogers, the bumbling soldier, there's a part of me that wants an alternate version of this movie that has that sequence of events that the super soldier serum happens first, and then he goes to the training camp, and we have this kind of, don't know my own strength kind of comedy routine where he climbs the rope wall and just tears the whole thing down and just kind of stands there kind of flummoxed like, what do I do with this?
Yeah. And one that actually takes Leander Dini and shrinks Sebastian Stan. So that Sebastian Stan is more comic allegiant, to that portrayal. A very scrawny Bucky. Yeah. But with Sebastian Stan's head. That's what I want. They have the technology.
They can do it. Come on. There is a 4-issue limited storyline called The Adventures of Captain America. It came out in 91. And a lot of this story, in fact, our character that we have here of Gilmore actually came from that line. It's a very brief character. He's only in it. He's only in the comics in that particular 4-issue series. And apparently, I didn't read through the whole thing, but apparently at the end of it, he ends up turning and becoming a Nazi. And I don't know if it's just because he is so irritated.
You don't say.
With Steve, yeah. You'd never guess the bully joins the Nazis. But yeah, Gilmore Hodge was created by Kevin McGuire and Fabian Nicieza. I'm not exactly sure how you say Fabian's last name. I am sorry, Fabian. And apparently his nickname was Goose. So, and then of course, I should mention Lex, the best last name for somebody in the military, Lex Shrapnel is playing Gilmore Hodge. Fantastic.
That's his real name. His real name is Lex Shrapnel.
They 100% should not have renamed him for the movie.
Oh my gosh.
Just left it, right?
That is more a comic book name than Gilmore Hodge is. That is an amazing name.
Yeah.
Holy, I'm going to be thinking about that the rest of the week.
No kidding.
If you come back next season as Father Shrapnel, we're going to have words.
No, I haven't stopped thinking about Lex Shrapnel. Do you think, would he named his kids like barbed wire shrapnel? I would.
No kidding. You got to come up with some good names. Yeah.
Oh, Rogue Shrapnel.
Interesting. Rogue Shrapnel. I will tell you his IMDb known for, because I can't imagine either of you follow Lex Shrapnel, although he does a lot of TV. I will
now.
Yeah. Sign me up. He does lots of TV. He's most known for this is his number one, and then the film Extinction from 2018, and then his first film, K-19 The Widowmaker from 2002. Last but not least is the TV series Medici, and from 2016. So, he's somebody who keeps
all of those
very,
things.
very busy. Well, and this is something we're going to find over and over in this film, is you're going to find a lot of Brits, because he's a British actor in these parts, because, again, they went over there to film just to have kind of that European look, since all of this takes place in the European theater. So,
well, I wouldn't have been able to guess. He affects that vague East Coast accent very well.
Yeah, he does great.
It's somewhere between the Bronx and New Jersey.
So, a very specific pinpoint, right? And let's see. The only other thing that I wanted to say is before we move on to our colonel here is we didn't mention this last time, but because we only had such a tiny bit of Agent Carter, she was first named in Captain America number 162 from June 1973, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And some of the other people considered for the role, Gemma Arterton, Emily Blunt, Alexa Davalos, Alice Eve, Keira Knightley, and Rosamund Pike. An interesting lineup. I could see.
Man, I am here for Emily Blunt as Agent Carter. Man,
she would be great.
But Hayley Atwell does such a fantastic job in this role.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's become like the character, and I think that's just because they wrote this relationship as it grows over time so well. Like by the time we get to Endgame and we have that last moment with them, that dance, it's just like I am in love with them as a couple. Like it's just it's perfect, you know.
And it's really starts here because after Peggy socks Hodge in the jaw, everyone else in the line is like, "Oh my gosh, look at that guy who's just eating dirt," and Steve is amused. He is quietly laughing at this. And without any malice, there's no sense of, that guy got what was coming to him. But it's like, wow, that was pretty impressive. That's pretty good. He's impressed, but also delighting in the scene in front of him. And that's that first hint of a personal connection between these two characters, that Steve sees Peggy in a different light than these other soldiers do.
Well, and we're going to see a lot of those little moments between the two of them. Like they're not always noticing each other but they're certainly noticing the other. And like there are a lot of those little moments, and it's great.
I was just thinking, it hasn't been that long since I've watched the whole movie, not minute by minute, but I was just trying to think, do you buy the fact that without the super soldier transformation, they would have ended up hooking up over the course of a lifetime?
I know,
or would he have been friend zoned?
I know it's not according to the Movies by Minutes covenant, but in the taxi scene as they're going to the secret lab,
when he's looking at his neighborhood and the alley,
I think there's some legitimate chemistry there, because she does not give a friend zone response to his line about waiting for the perfect partner. There's a genuine warmth there. Now, there's a question about how much of that is pitying as kind of the source of the warmth and affection, and how much of it is seeing him as equal and as partner. There's definitely some the relationship changes quite drastically after the super serum is administered. But I think there's a legit basis that's built up over this week, and especially as we get to the end of this week, I think there's a big moment that points to the real live possibility of this relationship, but also that little dialogue scene to set things up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I stand ready.
Yeah.
Ready for fireworks.
We will definitely kind of continue this conversation between now and the transformation, just to see. So by the time he's stepping into it, like if all of a sudden like the machine breaks, we need to follow up on this conversation and say, okay, if they leave, are they gonna? Is that when they first hook up? So we will follow up on this conversation, Pete.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's important.
All right.
I need to know that the little guy had a chance.
Little guy.
Pete, you are good enough. I just want to name that. I just want to put that out there right now.
God, didn't know how much I needed to hear
that. He needed that. He's been waiting since season 1 to hear that. Okay, well, at this point, let's start talking about Colonel Chester Phillips. Colonel Chester Phillips, Tommy Lee Jones. Before we dig into him, I want to do the IMDb game with dear old Tommy Lee Jones.
This is a curse of riches situation right now.
You are telling me, because, I mean, he's an actor. He is a director. I will say the 4 films that he is known for on his IMDb are all films. They're all films he's acted in. One that he's also directed. What would you say are the 4 films that IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, says through its crazy algorithm are the films that Tommy Lee Jones is known for?
The only one
as a native of Chicago, I got to go with The Fugitive.
That was my number 1 pick for sure. For sure.
because he has great just G-man swagger, which comes through in this role. And on that note, do I want to say Men in Black? I don't know. It's just, I don't know how much IMDb likes genre fiction when you have someone with as much of a filmography as Tommy Lee Jones.
But it was so big.
It was. All right, I'm gonna go Men in Black. And then I don't know what else to pick from, because you said they're all films, right?
They're all films. They're all yeah.
Gosh, because I was gonna say Lonesome Dove, but that's not a film.
Are they all live action, Andy?
Yes.
Grr, Small Soldiers, get out of here.
I would love Small Soldiers to be on this list. That would be amazing.
That would be so great.
What about Two-Face? What about Batman? Batman Forever. That was.
He is in that.
I don't think
he is
like
in
that.
I don't know.
There's another really big film that neither of you have mentioned.
Space Cowboys.
Best Picture winner.
Best Picture
winner.
Yeah.
Tommy Lee Jones.
What was Tommy Lee Jones?
He may not be the person that you primarily think about it. You likely are going to think of the villain of the film more than the other two leads, but he is definitely. You could say he's part of the title. 2007, if that helps.
Wait, what is it? No Country for Old Men.
There it is.
That's going to be my guess.
Wow. I feel regret. Okay. No Country.
I should have kept going with the put upon lawman angle that I had going.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That changes. That sends the game in a whole new direction.
Well, I will tell you at this point, you have two. The Fugitive
two
and No Country.
Okay, Fugitive. Oh, okay. Wasn't Men in Black.
Men in Black is not on there.
Because Men in Black 3 is the one that's on the list, right? No, I'm kidding. No.
Can you give? I like this when you give us a year. Can you give me another year?
2000. Let's go with 2012. We'll start there. This is another Best Picture nominee,
but it didn't win.
In fact, both of these last two are period pieces.
Wait, didn't Men in Black 3 come out in 2012? I think it did. But it's not nominated for Best Picture.
Okay. David, real talk. We have to let go of Men in Black.
Okay, all right. I'm letting it. It's a professional, bias thing. Men in Black, priests. All right, but I'm not just letting that go.
That's right.
Letting it go.
But this is one of 4 films that he did in 2012.
One of 4.
It's the one that was nominated for Best Picture, period piece.
Team of Rivals.
Lincoln.
Yes.
Lincoln. It is Lincoln.
I'm going to go with Lincoln.
It is Lincoln. He plays Thaddeus Stevens.
Okay. Wow.
Right. The last one is a tricky one because a lot of people probably forgot about this film. It was 2014. It is one of the 2 films that he directed. And this is the second of the 2. The first one, 3 Barrels of Melquiades Estrada, was in 2005.
I was just going to say that one, so you're saying it didn't.
It's not that film, which I'd love to see it on there because I love the film.
No, can you give me just give me some other people that are in this one because clearly I don't have it.
Hilary Swank is in it. Hilary Swank and Grace Gummer.
Oh,
Grace Gummer.
Yeah, Miranda Otto.
I didn't see it, so I know I can picture it. Like I can picture his sepia face, right?
Yeah.
And he has. Does he have an anchor, Andy?
No. He has the full. In fact, he's got so much hair. He's got mutton chops. Beard? No, he's got way more. This is okay. I'll tell you.
Mutton chops.
I'll just tell you. It's the film The Homesman.
Yeah.
3 women who have been driven mad by pioneer life are to be transported across the country by covered wagon by the pious, independently minded Mary B. Cuddy, who in turn employs low-life drifter George Briggs to assist her. So, Hilary Swank,
I love Fury
Tommy
Road.
Lee Jones. Yeah, right. So that's The Homesman. Those are the 4 films that IMDb says he is known for. It's always a surprise to see what IMDb throws in here. With so many films that he's done, he has worked with such a variety of directors. Clint Eastwood, he's worked with Robert Altman. Just, all the way back into the 70s. So he's got a lot of choices. But those are the 4.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
So now let's talk about the colonel. It's interesting, in the comics, he was a general, and he wasn't named initially, but he was right away involved in Operation Rebirth. Eventually, he is given his name, and at some point, they give him the first name Chester, although later they say it's Richard. Officially, though, they have now said his name is Chester Richard. So there you go. Colonel
Chester Richard, all
Chester
one word.
Richard. Oh, I was just going to say Chester Richard. Is that a hyphen?
Chester Richard.
Chester Richard.
Oh, it's a riches, a name of riches.
Yeah.
Now, what I love about this fantastic Tommy Lee Jones, we just love him as the Colonel.
Oh, he's great in this role. He's perfect
great
for
in this role. But I want to track this, because right now he really doesn't seem to care for Hodge, and I want to make sure we're tracking that, because we're gonna have a totally different perspective in a few minutes.
Well, he is doing the drill sergeant thing, where he is clearly dismissive of all of them because his agent just punched one of the candidates in the face, and he said, "Yeah, that's good, do that." So it's making it really clear that this is the kind of abuse that you can expect, and I, as the commanding officer, am on board with it.
Yes, I'm here for every bite of it.
It's good stuff.
And I love the shift from general to colonel, because as someone who has also seen a lot of movies about the military, colonel suggests to me like someone who is high enough rank to be in charge, but not so high as to get to meet with the president. So it's a nice like middle management rank in my mind. Like, I need to take this guy seriously, but I don't need to worry about them making a weird general decision, like a high level command kind of decision. There's someone above Colonel Phillips that our heroes can appeal to.
What I love about that particular angle is that clearly Colonel Phillips is still a colonel and still at Camp Lehigh, because he's a guy who has made some mistakes. He's there. Like, if we were following the Phillips movie, we would see that, maybe he punched a general once out of rage and wasn't able to really recover his career.
So it's interesting you go that direction instead of like the Top Gun Maverick direction, where it's like, no, I don't want that promotion. I want to stay.
I think that's giving him too much credit, too much superhero credit. Maverick is a superhero.
Now, on that question of rank, I did have a question about the rank structure of the SSR, because Carter introduces herself as Agent Carter. We're like, okay, agent, that puts me in the mind of FBI and kind of civilian kind of system where you have people who are doing things and, it's not really a military organization. But then we have Colonel, and it's easy to miss in the minute, but Peggy salutes the Colonel as he comes in. Mm-hmm. And as a civilian, I am not obligated to salute military personnel. In fact, it would be weird if I did, because I don't answer to them, even if they are military personnel. So clearly there's some kind of military hierarchy here. And so I'm just wondering what Agent Carter's promotion path or career advancement might look like. Is Colonel Carter in the cards for her if she sticks with the SSR? Because we know she gets to director eventually, but is there some kind of military substrata inside the SSR?
And as director, does she end up taking like a civilian or government non-military position? Because that's what it starts to feel like a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. And it does make me wonder, like, in context of militaries from different countries working together, because in this case, as we will find out, we have England working together with the U.S. in the context of what's going on here. It's like, are they saluting each other, and do they all call each other the same things? I know you've got, I think lieutenant is basically the same as they're always saying lieutenant over there. But I'm assuming it's really the same role, but it does make me wonder, is there slight differences, and, how does that work? It looks, I don't know if Peggy, I know that she actually started by joining the French resistance, and in the comics, I'm not exactly sure what her line of work was within to kind of end up becoming an agent and in this position where she was working in this capacity.
Because it requires a lot of comfort around military discipline, but also a good level of scientific knowledge, but also just kind of FBI field agent capabilities, able to run down investigations, physical fitness, handling criminals that we see in the Agent Carter series. It's much more of a FBI CIA kind of feel than it is a military operation. Kind of more James Bond than Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, and even like in the CIA, like the spy places, the MI6, where you have these agents. Like when I think about it, they're not necessarily, I mean, they obviously need to be showing respect to their superiors, but they're rarely like saluting. And again, my movie knowledge, I'm going into like James Bond territory now because, I mean, sure, he shows M plenty of respect, but also I don't recall him really ever coming in and actually saluting him,
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah.
Or her, depending on which M.
And yet he still got to wear like bars and, all the confetti on his chest.
I'm very curious. I'll have to do more digging on Carter over the season and see if I can come up with more information, or maybe some of our guests later will have some more background for her. But that is interesting because they are obviously working together. But you're right. She does salute him. And that could also just be something that she does, do you think, just for the men, like for the soldiers to say, we're working together and here's the person that you're all needing to salute now?
There's not a lot about Peggy Carter that is performative.
That's true. That is true.
She does what is expected of her because it is the right thing to do. She's not putting on a show for anybody.
Right.
As Colonel Phillips steps up, he has a line from General Patton: wars are fought with weapons, but they're won by men. It's actually something that apparently Patton wrote in what they have called his cavalry journal from September 1933. The full quote: new weapons are useful in that they add to the repertoire of killing, but, be they tank or tomahawk, weapons are only weapons after all. Wars are fought with weapons, but they are won by men. It is the spirit of the men who follow and of the man who leads that gains the victory. Interesting little quote from General Patton, who had plenty of interesting quotes.
Interesting little quotes, yes.
Yeah, I'll say. But Andy, I'm so glad you gave the full quote, because that line of Patton's about spirit is really important, because that's a theme that we're going to see over these coming minutes, over this week, that there is something almost undefinable that this program is looking for. They're looking for spirit. Colonel Phillips will say something about guts later on, but there's something beyond the physical, and that's what Patton is trying to get at. There's the machinery of war, there's the tools of the trade, but it's something almost spiritual, something that goes beyond the merely physical, that explains how one side is able to prevail over the other.
It's a really interesting line, and I think that's right. It is about kind of the spirit of the man and the leader, and I think there's a lot more to what this whole thing has to say about kind of all of this. Now, I mean, it's designed in the script very much to have this really great moment from Colonel Phillips. Tommy Lee Jones is perfect because you have that line, and then he immediately pulls out of the quote and he says, "We're going to win this war because we have the best," and then he sees Steve and kind of just stumbles the word men because he's looking at this scrawny little guy. It is one of the funniest deliveries, and Tommy Lee Jones is so perfect at it. But I mean, yes, it's designed, it's here because of that. But I do find that full quote is actually really interesting in context of this, especially because what Captain America will come to represent. And as this spirit of not necessarily like the government and the war machine, but really like the idea of what it means and everything. And he really does end up becoming that leader. And I think it's a really interesting kind of just quote to look at.
Goes right back to strength, what we were talking about with strength, because Tommy Lee Jones now is talking about the strength of not just a man to overcome, but of men to overcome adversity. And here he is looking at all of the different ways strength is portrayed in the military. And it is the central question of the next 10 minutes.
Oh, what a great line read.
Yep.
It's just that perfect beat in between that line, and the editing.
And because they'll get better.
Right.
Yeah.
There are so many great glances here, because he looks at Steve there, and then he looks at Erskine, and Erskine kind of looks away. And then after Phillips walks away, Steve does that little glance at him. It's like all these little looks. It's like, God, it's perfect the way that this whole thing was crafted. I just love it.
it's what's good about Marvel movies is they have these little moments of characterization that allow you to get a sense for these individuals in a very short amount of time, because this movie has a job to do. This movie has to explain Captain America's origins. We have to get him ready for the Avengers, because now we know that is coming. Now we have an end goal, so we have a story that we need to get through. But in the telling of the story and recognizing, okay, there's a lot we have to do in order to get this character where we need him to be for the larger meta narrative, still we want to do justice to the story we have here. And so Colonel Phillips does not become merely a caricature, although he's a broad archetype of a character. There's not a lot of depth to Colonel Phillips, but he is not a complete cardboard cutout either. He is someone that we see the hesitancy, we see the doubt in him, and we also see that Steve he's not a dummy. He knows that he is behind the eight ball in more ways than one, and he knows that the Colonel is referring to him. Steve is sensitive enough to his own state of being, and he's like, okay, this is the guy I got to keep an eye on. This is the guy that I have to deal with.
Well, and another key thing about Phillips is, and Pete, you and I talked about this in our first week of minutes when we were talking about kind of our initial reactions to Captain America when we first saw it, and how I really struggled with it, because I'm like, well, this guy just never changes. He's always great. He's always this character, and he just trucks through the whole film, and it kind of it's a bore because we're just watching him, he's great as Steve, and then he becomes Captain America, and he's great. What I was missing, though, is that it's really like this character right here. This is our change character. This is the character whose mind, Steve Rogers, is going to change over the film. And the person who doesn't buy into this whole thing, will slowly start seeing that there is possibility and that there is a chance that this person could be that voice. And again, to that quote, this is the person who has that spirit that men will follow to gain the victory. And so I really enjoy the way that this character is set up here, because right now we're getting exactly where he is in the film. He sees Steve, he rolls his eyes. He's just like, I can't believe it. Like it's just perfect. It's a great setup for where this character is going to go.
Well, and that's a great point and a great callback to that earlier conversation, that the reason this movie is different and the reason this character is different is because he is the stalwart staple, and the journey is not his of change. It's the journey of that which he changes around him. And that we have these two characters right here reflecting off of him, that here's Peggy Carter, who is reflecting her joy at being in his space, right? You can already, you start to see her find an affinity for the little guy, and you see the Colonel here who resents him for his size and his lack of stereotypical soldiery. Those are two pivot characters to watch, and I think that's in terms of how Steve is able to change them over time. Awesome.
That's great stuff. He does kind of continue his monologue here, and we kind of kick off this, what we'll see as this montage, this training montage. Yes. Let's get ready for our montage. As we cut into we're in the barracks now. We're in the I guess it's the tent. I'm not exactly sure. It looks like in the background there are these, I don't know, these, what would you call those things? It's just like a curved, thing that the soldiers live in. That it just looks like very easy to kind of move and set up and stuff. I'm not sure.
I think it's just a Quonset hut. I think it's just typical army barracks, very no frills housing setup.
Super basic, yeah. But we see some books getting unpacked. We see a couple of the books, The Machinery of War and Heroes of the Eastern Front. There's some playing cards. It might be soap. We don't know whose it is, but we see something getting unpacked, and that's kind of where the minute ends. We'll talk more about all this tomorrow. Do either of you have any little bits about this? Otherwise, I want to jump into the Christ in the Cape with you and give you the floor, Father.
Oh, well, thank you very much. The only thing I have is it's cheating a little bit because we know whose trunk it is. But,
sure.
Given the competitive nature of this whole setup, the deck of cards strikes me as being a little optimistic, because I don't know how many people are going to want to play a friendly game of cards with anyone in this barracks if there is going to be this kind of competition to see who the best candidate is going to be.
It could make for more aggressive card playing, I guess, maybe. All right, Pete, any last thoughts of this bit?
All I can think of right now is, what if the part of Tommy Lee Jones was actually played by Wilson Phillips, and this was all a musical?
We'll be able to talk about Captain America and musicals later in the film, so don't you worry. Don't you worry. All right, Father Mowry, we will give you the floor.
Well, thank you very much. So before in the green room, Andy asked, like, "Oh, Father, did you have Christ and the Cape prepared?" Like, "Oh, do I have Christ and the Cape prepared? Who do you take me for?" Of course. So in Captain America, what I want to start with is and Christ the Cape is just a little segment because as a Catholic priest, whenever I watch a movie, I'm always attentive to the theological themes that are going on in it. And superhero movies are really fascinating because they present these questions about confronting evil and salvation and hero figures. And I believe very strongly that the whole Western idea of the superhero is haunted by the Christ myth in the background as one of the prototypes for understanding this kind of savior story. And so let's start with Christology, that kind of theology of the person of Jesus Christ. So first, we mentioned a little bit of it already, kind of this idea of the perfect hero. We've been accustomed to stories, especially in the last century or so, of flawed heroes, of people who have something really debilitating, and a lot of the stories that we've done in movie making have centered around these flawed figures. And part of that is a reaction to this idea of the perfect hero, of the kind of chivalrous knight coming from medieval romances and going all the way back to Jesus himself. Jesus is presented as the one who is without sin. There are no flaws in the person of Jesus, and even especially in the very high presentation of the person of Jesus in the Gospel of John, he's fully in control of the story. So then where is the drama? Where is the tension? It comes in the response to the hero. So if this hero presents himself in this way, how do people respond to that? How are others changed by that? And we see that in Steve Rogers. This is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, there hasn't been a good Superman movie in the last 20 years or so, because Superman has the same problem as Captain America. He's kind of always right, kind of always has to be the perfect person, and it's hard to create a lot of characters who are deep enough to react to the hero around him. It's much easier to create one deep character and tell one character story. It's hard to create a whole cast of deep characters and the responses to it. But Captain America does a good job of building out this ensemble of characters around Captain America, with Peggy, with the Colonel, and with Bucky. And we see these people react and respond and change in response to Steve doing the right thing and being forthright. The other thing about Captain America that's interesting is that it presents a particular way of thinking about savior figures that turned out to be not such a great way of understanding the person of Jesus. So Steve Rogers and Captain America represent what's kind of known as an adoptionist Christology, which is this idea way back, early in the history of the church. There was this idea that, well, Jesus started off as a good man. He started off as someone who was already morally virtuous, who did everything right. And then he was rewarded by God and became the Savior. He was given the Holy Spirit. He was made the Christ because he was already good. And you can see that idea in Steve. Steve is already a good man, and receiving the super serum just enhances him, makes him more of what he already was. And the unfortunate tendency for this is that it kind of cuts out any possibility for conversion, that in order for me as a human being to kind of get God's grace or get God's love, I already have to be good. But I already know I'm not such a great person. I already know I got a lot of flaws, which is why we've been telling stories about flawed characters for years and years, because we don't really buy into that perfect person, because we all know we all have difficulties. So what we have in Captain America is this kind of adoptionist idea that goodness is made into greatness. And it happens, of course, not through the grace of God, not through the descent of the Holy Spirit, but through our old friend technology. Yes, he's a tech-anointed savior, but there are no metal suits here. This is all biotech. We have serum and Vita rays and all kinds of mad science, which is just delightful. And what happens here, though, with Steve Rogers that doesn't happen with Tony Stark. Tony Stark goes through an outside-in transformation. He puts on the suit, and that identity of Iron Man eventually seeps into the core of his being, which leads up to the pinnacle of his character development in Endgame. With Steve Rogers, it's an inside-out transformation. He already has strength. He already has goodness within him. The serum and the Vita rays just make manifest what's already present inside of him. And that creates an unfortunate kind of image where the movie kind of sets up this idea that it's not enough to be good. You have to be good and strong in order to be a hero. And Steve is already a hero. He's already willing to stand up for what's right, but, you know, he's a weakling. He has asthma. He has a history of prior conditions from his family. And so, yeah, it's all well and good for him to tell the bully in the movie theater to shut up, but if he can't put his money where his mouth is, there's this just subtle theme in the story of the movie that, well, you know, this isn't ideal. This isn't the way things need to be. You need strength to back up the virtue. And as a Catholic priest, I'm not in for that, because I tell the story every Sunday of God who went to death, who was crucified, who embraced weakness, and that goodness of God, that love of God was made perfect in weakness. There wasn't a necessary show of strength, but rather a full acceptance of everything evil that the world had to offer. And so it raises some questions for me about Steve's character. The movie hints at this in some of the early scenes where Bucky has that line about, does Steve have something to prove? And we never quite come back to that in the movie. The movie just kind of drops like, no, he's Captain America now. Everything's great. And there's no sense of wrestling. We never see Steve get a big head, which is fine with me. I don't really like that storyline in movies, but there is the sense like, okay, there's no temptation for Steve. There's no sense of entitlement that he really struggles with. And so then it depends upon the strength of those characters around him to really sell the moral goodness of it. So this idea of the savior as one who changes the people around him is great. I love that. The idea that the savior has to be given a power in order to have the goodness be efficacious, though, I mean, that goes back to what I've said before. Like, I know face punching is the way to save the day. It just, you know, there's only so much of that I can take. In the face, you know, specifically, because that's the moneymaker. Specifically
the face. Well, you know, Captain America issue number 1, he's punching Hitler in the face.
In the face!
Right out of the gate.
And this week's Christ the Cave is all the reasons that he'll never hook up with Peggy Carter until his legs are the size of tree trunks. I never would have imagined that it would take a Catholic priest to actually make that case, but I feel vindicated.
You know, I think that's an argument you can make. I think that's,
yes, it is.
I mean, and part of that is the valorization of romantic love as the only kind of love that you can have in a film. And Christ-like love is a self-sacrificial agape kind of love. And even in this movie where there is a self-sacrifice, it's presented to us in romantic terms, that the sacrifice being made is the sacrifice of a one-on-one intimate relationship. There's no sense of a higher transcendence or purpose behind that. However noble Steve Rogers' act is, it's framed for us inside a relationship with Peggy Carter.
Right. Well, and to this point, Andy, have your intern make a note. We need to have more of this conversation back when we get to the point of reflecting on Bucky and Steve's relationship, because that's really where so much of this discussion of sacrifice happens to me in this movie, which is their relationship of love and admiration for each other as peers. And how do they change one another? And what is the loss that they go through when we lose, in the context of this movie, all that we know is we've just lost Bucky. And so I think that's really interesting.
Wow. If anything, this the conversation today has opened up doors for so many conversations in future episodes. We're going to have to make sure we track all of that so that we can have those conversations, because there will be a lot of interesting things to talk about, right? Our intern is busy taking so many notes. Our actually intern's too busy passing out living will and testaments to everyone.
Right. Yeah, how many next of kin do I need to put down on this form?
Right, exactly. Well, that is it for today's minute, unless either of you have any last thoughts or any comments. No. Yeah, it's been a long one. Lots of good stuff, though. Lots of good stuff. All right. Well, Father David, remind everyone where they can find more of you and the shows you've been on, et cetera, et cetera.
You can find me at my website, fatherdavidmowry.com. I have a section there where I've put together links to all the various Movies by Minutes podcasts that I've been a part of. If you, for whatever reason, if you missed last season of the Marvel Movie Minute, I was on for a week talking about Thor. And if you would guess that, well, maybe a movie about a Norse god might prompt some discussions like Christ in the Cape, you have no idea. So go ahead and check out those minutes if you're interested in that level of theological discourse about pagan space Vikings.
Well, and death and resurrection. Very fitting.
Just a little bit of death and resurrection. Yeah.
Just a bit. It was a fantastic week. Definitely check it out, everybody. And that's it for today. So we will be back tomorrow to continue our montage. Pete, thanks as always.
And you, Andy.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.